Wow, in the last tier list video, I asked for 30 likes within 1 week of uploading, and y'all hit that in a day. You guys absolutely smashed the like goal. So, as promised, we're doing another tier list. First, I wanted to touch base before we get started. Since last upload, we hit 1,000 subs on the channel, and I just wanted to thank you guys so much. 4,000 on the gaming channel was easy enough since gaming content has a more mass appeal, but martial arts manga is fairly niche and a person's personality and specific content carry the channel in my experience. So it's more difficult to gain a following, but sure enough, in less than 5 years, I've already got an awesome community of 1,000 strong. That absolutely blows me away, and I wanted to thank you guys so much, because it's like I always say, a video that nobody wants to watch, or a YouTube channel with no community, is basically worthless. I like talking about this stuff, but having viewers watching my videos and a great community that interacts with and supports me and leaves requests and talks is so much more rewarding. Oh, also the money I'm making off you fuckers doesn't hurt either. Seriously though, thanks guys. Without you, I'd just be a guy with an expensive PC and a mic talking to himself alone in his room, wasting thousands of hours editing videos for just himself. Now, on the topic of what's coming and this tier list, I've still got Can You Beat Street Fighter 6's Q, Combat Clarification Grappler Baki Styles Explain Japanese Jujutsu, and Kengan Maximum Kaneda Suikichi vs Retsukayo in an array of different states of completion, but all started. But if this video gets 70 likes within a week, y'all get another tier list. This tier list is actually special, as it was requested and created by somebody in the Discord, the homie Parsons, so thank you fam and I hope you enjoy. Also, super special thank you to Lined Office, another homie in the Discord that helped me to identify every single character I didn't recognize. God bless you man, you're a hero of the channel. So, this is a tier list rating the hand-to-hand combat skills of several of the most skilled martial artists in fiction, and Goku. I love these kinds of skill discussions and debates, and I'm super excited to jump into it, so be prepared for some potentially spicy takes, and let's get started. So to start, I'll be putting Sam Fisher of Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell in B tier. Now, before you potentially bust out the pitchforks and torches, just remember that this is a hand-to-hand combat skill tier list only. If this included general skill, well, considering his stealth skills, spycraft skills, and his marksmanship skills, Sam would easily rank amongst the top of the list. But while his CQC skills are top-notch, he's only above average in terms of martial arts skill alone, as it's only one facet of his overall skill set. Speaking of his top-notch martial arts skill, let's talk about those. To rattle off a few impressive feats, he once took down 2 armed pursuing police officers using the element of surprise and a Krav Maga technique called Dead Sides, wherein the user closes the distance between them and their opponent's means of attack, not giving them any room to attack. From there, Sam disarms and dispatches both officers, but that ain't even the half of it. In something straight out of Nico Styles' Flame Kata, Sam once springboarded off of a wall, tackled a man, caught himself with his fingertips before moving into a split-second handstand, and then jackknifing into the air to continue sprinting, all without really losing much momentum, if any. Another incredible feat of martial skill was when Sam Fisher knocked out 2 armed men with his hands bound under 6 seconds. Does that really need an explanation? No? Okay, cool. To close on Sam Fisher and his skills, he's also proficient in choking and strangulation holds and techniques like the sleeper hold, so he's a multifaceted hand-to-hand fighter as well as a skilled one. Now, Sam is incredibly skilled in martial arts, but the only reason he only got to B tier is, while he's clearly head over shoulders more skilled than most anyone he faces, defeating them typically through skill alone as they aren't that far apart in physical power and ability, these skill feats are impressive but still reasonable as opposed to the outlandish, borderline fantastical skills of others on this list. Speaking of, next is Karn the Betrayer of Warhammer 40k. And for anyone acquainted with the insanity and extremeness of Warhammer, it should come as no surprise that Karn is our first A tier and nearly breached into S tier. The man is so skilled, he somehow parries a sword swing from the demon primarch of the World Eaters, Angron, who is easily hundreds of times stronger than him. Angron was actually so much stronger that, while Karn was able to manage a second parry at the cost of tearing his arm, a third parry would not have been possible, sheerly due to the power difference wearing down on Karn's body. Against foes of more equal power, such as an elite Space Marine duelist, Karn's able to defeat his opponent even with tons of distractions. And all of those feats are even before the current events of Warhammer. Rather, these all take place 10,000 years before modern Warhammer 40k. The only reason he's not an S tier is because the Angron feat is his best feat and is insanely better than any of his other hand-to-hand combat skill feats. There are other good feats like skill scaling through beating Sigismund, the most skilled space marine, and being a better duelist than Azrael, but Sigismund got a rematch with him and won, and the Azrael scaling is definitely worthy of A tier, but maybe not quite S tier. For Fist of the North Star's Kenshiro, this should come as no surprise, but the man gets S tier. Even without Hokuto Shinken, Ken is skilled enough to stop Shin's attack, which is specifically designed to prevent counters by creating several afterimages on each hand, by literally reaching out and grabbing his hand, and that was before the time skip in Fist of the North Star. With Hokuto, he's a pressure point master. I'm not sure about including feats of him blowing people up with Hokuto, as it's a result of him injecting ki into pressure points, which makes the whole hand-to-hand aspect of it dicey. But even without that, mastering an entire style of pressure point martial arts is incredibly impressive in its own right, and he has dozens of techniques within the style for many different effects, like the Hokuto Goken Buden Kyaku, a pressure point high kick, which anyone that practices martial arts can tell you that precision striking with high kicks is hard enough without trying for small pressure points. That seems to basically be a permanent muscle relaxant that weakens the target. I'm also not entirely sure what to do with Muso Tensei, which makes Ken intangible, nearly invisible, and able to use the techniques of fallen rivals, each with skills that could rival Ken to some degree, but explosive pressure points and Muso Tensei or no, Kenshiro is easily a tier list topper with few peers and equals. So this next character appears to be Rimuru Tempest from the time I got reincarnated by a slime, and I'm not too familiar with the series, so this might be wrong, but I'm thinking of putting him into D tier. So as far as I know, all of his skills and abilities are magical or use magic to boost his physical abilities. I'm not aware of him having any martial arts skills, but if I'm wrong, let me know in the comments. Ah yes, one of the coolest video game protagonists ever, Ashura from Ashura's Wrath. So one impressive feat of skill he has is adapting to the unorthodox fighting style of Chakravartin, showing an ability to evolve his own fighting style on the fly to specifically overcome or match a completely alien style. In more powerful forms, he's shown to even have the skill to catch a missile in midair and return to sender that shit. Like, the physical power of that aside, that would take the same precision and hand-eye coordination to catch and throw an arrow. Though arguably maybe less impressive since a missile is, of course, massively bigger and easier to catch than an arrow. Overall, I think that Ashura fits well into C tier, a skilled hand-to-hand combatant, but sheer power of rage and will is more his wheelhouse. Onto one of the most iconic comic book characters of all time, Batman, who, fun fact, I've been getting way deep into recently. So of course Batman has a shit ton of feats in general, with CQC being no exception, but to pick my favorites, Batman was able to predict Vigilante's move before he even made it, exhibiting the ability of analytical prediction. He's mastered virtually all forms of physical combat, a near requirement for S tier. He's able to instantly recognize a technique called Falling Leaf, a technique so obscure that only 3 people in the entire world, Bruce included, know the technique. His pressure point abilities are so potent he can even incapacitate a cyborg gorilla. He literally knows the Vulcan neck pinch. And he even almost managed to successfully use a pressure point strike on a werewolf. Those are just a couple of the dozens of skill feats for Batman, each as impressive as the last if not more so, granting him the coveted spot of S tier. Black Panther is a similar hero from Marvel Comics that, despite being more of a mix of a superhuman Batman and Iron Man, still has his fair share of combat skill feats. For example, one I was particularly impressed by, Black Panther was able to reverse positions with somebody above him while hanging on a cliff. Not only fighting against gravity and lifting his entire body weight upward, but also ankle picking somebody above him while doing that. He was also able to knock down the near-invincible Luke Cage with a pressure point strike, and has even restrained the vastly stronger Silver Surfer using a hold not dissimilar to Nico-style Binding Demon from Kengan Omega. While he seems to rely more on his superhuman physicality and his science and intelligence, his martial arts skill is nothing to scoff at, so I'll give him B tier. Another CQC expert from Marvel, Captain America would probably be an A tier if I were to include his shield skills, but since this is supposed to be hand-to-hand skill, while I think he's a superior martial artist to Black Panther, he unfortunately only gets relegated to B tier. Still though, he's definitely worthy of ranking here, as he can trade with Shang-Chi, somebody we'll talk about later, he can KO people with nerve cluster strikes, take out an entire team of people trained to defeat superheroes, and even masters a fighting style more completely than those that have been practicing it for decades on his first try using it. Rambo's kinda hard to gauge since he's mainly a weapons and guerrilla tactics user, but he's shown to be an above average striker and wrestler on more than one occasion, and his general close range combat skills with weapons should somewhat transfer over, so I'll probably give him C tier. Goku. Looks like Parsons is trying to get me into trouble. Well, okay, I guess this just became a trial. First off, no key feats. If we include that, we might as well get Asta and Harry Potter and Dr. Fate and Doctor Strange and all the other wizards and magicians in here too. Looking solely at hand-to-hand combat skills, Goku's probably sitting at a B tier. He's got good feats like instantly copying Roshi's afterimage techniques, countering Drunken Fist with a self-made style called Mad Fist, having no openings in his guard, and predicting where Hit will attack him from after time skipping, but the quality and quantity of these skills just isn't that impressive. Now Goku's no slouch, that's for certain, but Cap can instantly copy techniques as well. As impressive as creating a style to counter a style is, Goku's counter is way too situational and dependent on catching the opponent off guard. Having no openings is probably his best feat, and even that's not S tier material. And countering time skip by predicting, as impressive as it sounds, is literally just how prediction works. Even if we throw in Ultra Instinct, which, you know what? I will! He still only gets to A tier, as Instinctive Reaction is an incredibly common martial arts power in fiction, to the point that even a lot of non-martial arts characters have it, and some people even pull it off in real-life UFC matches. Next up, Mori Jin from the God of High School. So Renewal Taekwondo is a pretty impressive evolution of Taekwondo, and Mori's pretty much mastered it to my knowledge. So not only does he hard counter ITF Taekwondo, but he has all the kicking skills of General Taekwondo amped up to 11, as is shown in his signature move Huichuk, a consecutive triple kick that uses the first two kicks to set up for the third, and even in spite of Re-TKD's weaknesses, Jin has even improved the style and overcome them. He can copy moves after seeing them once and even create new moves from the copied ones, so B tier at least, can string together two consecutive uses of said move, and is a master of acupuncture after learning it from a book. The rest of his abilities are mainly magic from being Sun Wukong, but I think that, based on those feats alone, he's got a strong placement in A tier. Kratos suffers the same problem as Ashura, but even worse. As cool and awesome as Kratos is, his main beat is sheer power of will and rage, but unlike Ashura, he mostly uses weapons. He rarely uses his bare hands and even more rarely uses his fists skillfully. He has displayed a skillful use of hand-to-hand combat before and is likely skilled in pankration, but from what little we see and what little we know, he's going into C tier. Seiya of Saint Seiya seems to have a decent understanding of hand-to-hand combat on some level, knowing that you can target a kicker's legs or a puncher's arms to weaken them. He's capable of identifying and capitalizing on an opening that's only available for an instant, defeating an opponent of equal power with a vital strike, and even restarting said opponent's heart while beaten from the fight. But as impressive as all that is, that's pretty much it for unarmed skill, so I'll probably put him into low B tier. Saitama is D tier, and I really shouldn't have to explain why. So I don't know a lot about Journey of the West Sun Wukong, but Goku's inspiration here is probably an A tier. His magical power is incredible, and his martial ability is apparently equivalent. He's fought thousands of trained gods and heavenly warriors that are millions of years old, and while I don't personally put much stock into feats like this, as we have no way of knowing how skilled these gods and divine warriors are, it's definitely worth mentioning, and apparently he has precognition that allows him knowledge of every event within thousands of miles without even moving, which might be related to hand-to-hand combat? His A tier mainly comes from his magic and martial arts being equal, but those other feats are potentially really incredible. Solid Snake should rival Sam Fisher at least, but let's talk about it. So I know David is a master of several military CQC systems like Line, CQB, and McMap, with McMap-trained soldiers being more skilled hand-to-hand combatants than high-level UFC fighters. He was able to beat 3 armed, genetically engineered Genome Special Forces soldiers that got the drop on him, while almost completely unarmed, only using a pistol at the end of the engagement. He was able to defeat the stronger, faster, and mechanically enhanced cyborg ninja Grey Fox in either an even battle getting severely beaten, or in a one-sided battle having never even taken a hit, is a master of CQC, a brand new style of CQC martial art designed to be used in an area where guns are not of much use, is made to fight multiple enemies in mind, and is made to deal with surprise attacks in close quarters as well. It's also stated to be the total combat technique for hand-to-hand with guns and knives worked in, so he's a master of fighting an unarmed enemy, making an armed enemy into an unarmed enemy, and even defeating an armed enemy all while unarmed. I think, after all said and done, that Snake is a better hand-to-hand fighter between him and Sam, but I don't think he's quite into A tier, so B tier it is. Superman's an interesting one that I was expecting to put into D, maybe C tier, since I'm pretty sure he knows some Kryptonian martial art or something, but after finding out he's got a hand-to-hand combat-focused state that he can enter, and he could even beat Mongul with his hand-to-hand skills even while angry, I think he fits pretty squarely into C tier. Thor seems to have very limited unarmed combat skills, which makes sense since his whole shtick is controlling weather and hitting people with Mjolnir, but that excuse doesn't save him from D tier. Wildcat, despite my not being familiar with him before this tier list, has quickly become a favorite of mine, being an incredible Muhammad Ali or Mike Tyson level boxer that not only became a superhero capable of completely outclassing Mr. Terrific in a boxing match, but he even taught Batman boxing and can take out armed soldiers even without boxing. Considering the caliber of his boxing and how highly skilled fighters speak of him and think of him, I think the champ has earned himself a spot in B tier. I'm not too familiar with Toriko, but I do know that he's a master of Shokugi, a style of martial arts that allows the user to simulate kitchen utensils, so a cooking version of Yumi from Kengan. Based on what little I know of him, like that he's able to slice clean through bottles and fishing rods with his bare hands, keep his balance perfectly on a rocky boat, can use a combo of top-selling game Fork Knife to kill a Garara Gator, has consecutively focused attacks like 3-hit Nail Punch, has a 5-hit version, copied Life Erase from Coco, has an even further advanced Nail Punch in the form of the 1-point concentrated 5-fold Ice Pick, has a 6-fold Nail Punch, has a 10-fold Nail Punch, has a flying fork and knife variation, has a 7-fold, a 12-fold, and a 13-fold Nail Punch, has a leg fork and knife, has a fucking 15-fold Nail Punch, and so on and so on. I think A tier is a good spot for him. His skills are limited to about 5 or 6 different things, but those things just get exponentially more and more skilled throughout the series' long run. Pyron is another case of Rimuru, a very powerful being that just doesn't rely on unarmed skill. He has fought potentially skilled combatants, but never really employs skill himself. D tier. Hayato Furinji is one of the greatest martial artists in all of fiction, with amazing techniques like his Ryusei Seikyuken that allows him to parry, block, or deflect any attack that enters his dominance zone, or a sphere that extends from him that represents the full range of his offense and defense, and immobilize the person whose attacks he defended against by bottoming out their strength, just like that one Kenshiro technique. Hayato may not have mastered all martial arts in the world, but with skill enough to fight against both the series protagonist Kenichi, as well as Hayato's own daughter Miyu, an incredibly powerful martial artist trained by him, at the same time at 0.0002% power, with his eyes closed, controlling the left and right side of his body entirely separately from each other, he should obviously be one of the few peers that Ken has. For 007's James Bond, I'll be ranking a composite of all of his feats in the movies from all the different actors that have played him so far. Starting with the man in the picture, James Bond once skillfully and quietly took down a man in a single blow, and then was able to swap into his scuba gear as a disguise, the single strike and quiet KO being the standout here, even if it was by surprise. A different James Bond once defeated a larger, stronger opponent that also got the drop on him by using almost solely hand-to-hand combat, only relying on the occasional improvised weapon otherwise. Finally, not only can he take out a normal guy in a single strike and a larger, stronger opponent, but Bond is even skilled enough to take out multiple opponents at once. In a bar fight against a group of men using improvised weapons, Bond was able to defeat them bare-handed, though he did have an armed ally that helped him in the fight. He's also fought against armed opponents while unarmed, and considering that with everything else, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to compare him to Snake and Sam, though unfortunately for Bond, most of his feats have a catch when Sam and Snake's don't. He knocked out a man in a single strike, but it was a surprise attack. He defeated a larger, stronger opponent, but improvised weapons were involved. He defeated about 4 guys in a bar fight barehanded, but he had an ally helping him. B tier for sure, but he's not outclassing the likes of Sam Fisher anytime soon. X-Men's Wolverine has had hundreds of years to hone his skills and sharpen his martial arts. But how much fist fighting can we expect from a man with claws? Well, a look inside his head can at least answer as to how skilled he is in melee combat, which should apply claws or no, and his skill is apparently equivalent to an Olympic gymnast doing a gold medal routine while simultaneously defeating 4 chess computers in his head. Say what you will about comics, but they have a gift for describing things in an interesting way. Even without claws, his martial arts skills scale above a woman named Yukio, whose own skill is described as defying description. At the very least, he out-martial artsed Cap. So while I'm not sure if I'd say he's more skilled than Snake, due to Snake's having more solid feats, he's definitely breaching Sam's threshold of impressive but realistic, and straight up beats Cap, so B tier. Leonardo is definitely a worthy leader for the Ninja Turtles, as he's already in at least B tier via being able to knock a person out instantly with a pressure point. But even beyond that, he even has the precision to, after disarming a knife from an enemy, then backflip kick the knife into another enemy behind him, and only pin them against something without killing them. There are plenty of other impressive feats that Leonardo has, but the long and short of it is that, as impressive as Leo is, Wolverine's still got the edge. Omni-Man gets dropped straight into D tier. He has non-CQC skills like his expert flight control and his skill incorporating that range of motion into CQC, but that, I think, doesn't compare to the skills of those in C tier. Spider-Man goes into C tier as, at least from what I can tell, while he is a good hand-to-hand fighter in general and fights multiple people often, his spider senses and webbing powers are typically heavily involved, and Spidey doesn't have a great track record of fighting skilled opponents. One feather in Spidey's cap is that he's got his own Spider-Man martial arts devised by Shang-Chi, which is great, but it does hurt that Shang-Chi made it and tailored it specifically for Peter to be able to master it easily by virtue of it being specifically designed to utilize all of Peter's powers and abilities cohesively, so C tier should work. Finn the Human is a great fighter. He'll tell you.
First off, I'm a great fighter.
He usually uses a sword, but is shown to be able to disarm a knife with a kick, and is actually an impressive wrestler, using his Chokey Brokey style to literally choke and joint lock Jake in basically a single move. Sure, his skills aren't bonkers, but I think either of those feats alone qualifies him for low B tier. Back to characters that are dedicated martial artists specifically, we have one of the most iconic fighting game characters of all time, Ryu. While Hadouken feats won't be considered, Ryu has plenty of amazing martial arts techniques like the Shoryuken, a jumping uppercut that has the user rotate their whole body to land in their original stance, its Metsu and Shin counterparts, his Tatsumaki Senpu Kyaku, an impressive consecutive jumping spinning crescent kick combo, its more powerful counterpart Shinku Tatsumaki, his high blade foot kick or Jodan Sokudogiri, his Hanagashi parry and Tenshin counter-strike, and his Ishin super counter-strike. Ryu is also capable of defeating other trained martial artists with special powers like M. Bison, and even kept up with one of Chun-Li's martial arts masters and a man considered as a rival by Akuma, Gen. While I think he lacks concrete feats of precision, predictive ability, copying skills, analytical ability, and other such feats of skill, his general display of hand-to-hand combat and his general mastery of movements and applications of martial arts speak for themselves. His lack of concrete feats and statements hold him back to the lower end of the tier, but I think it's safe to say that Ryu deserves A tier. Another iconic fighting game character and the leading protagonist, of my favorite fighting game series, Jin Kazama is similar to Ryu in that his martial arts skill and mastery are apparent in his movements, but he takes it a step even further as Tekken tends to feature more cutscenes with martial arts and skill feats. In his gameplay movements, being that he's a master of both Kyokushin Karate and Mishima Karate as well as Kazama Jujutsu, he tends to use a plethora of feints into other attacks like Brazilian kicks or feint kicks into sweeps, so he utilizes feigning extremely effectively on top of being a master of 3 different martial arts. Add to that he doesn't lack in the scaling department, going toe-to-toe with Kazuya and Heihachi in a 3-way battle, and I would actually consider Jin, specifically in the martial arts skill department, being above Ryu. though I may be biased in the fact that Jin's movements are typically more realistic, so it's easier to see his martial skill when compared to real life. Jago, one of the most badass main characters in all the fighting games, will probably end up below Black Panther, with Jago basically being a nearly featless Ryu, having Tiger Fury for Ryu's Shoryuken, and Wind Kick for Tatsumaki Senpukyaku. Jago also has less impressive scaling, typically more often fighting monsters like Agno, Spinal, Gargos, or Idol, rather than the mostly martial arts like Ryu fights, and Jago has fewer moves and a shorter overall history. Okay, this one might be a bit of a shocker for those that don't know much about King of Fighters other than it's a fighting game, but Orochi, one of the main bad guys of the KOF fighting game series, goes into D tier. He, doesn't use any martial arts. At all. He can possess people like Chris, Shermie, and Yashiro, each of them having limited martial arts ability, but Orochi himself basically just uses Divine Gaia magic to fight. Liu Kang, another of the most famous martial arts characters in fighting games, has been taught martial arts by Bo Raicho, a master of Drunken Fist Kung Fu and, to some extent, sumo wrestling, and Liu Kang himself is a master of Pao Chui Kung Fu and Junfan Kung Fu, or more commonly known as Bruce Lee Kung Fu or Jeet Kune Do, and a master to such a degree that he can teach it. Being that he's a master of two different martial arts well enough to combat other masters and teach a student into mastery, and he's received martial art instructions in turn by a fighter with mastery in potentially two arts in his own right, I think a placement in B tier is a good place for him, held back from A tier due to a lack of feats or much mention of his martial arts outside of Mortal Kombat Deception and a bit in Deadly Alliance. I'm not at all familiar with Blood Sign, this being my first time I've ever even heard of it, but we're dropping the White Queen into D tier. As powerful as she is, and she's incredibly powerful, she isn't a martial artist. She doesn't fight in hand-to-hand combat that I can tell, and she has no skill feats. Fatal Fury's Terry Bogard, one of my personal favorite fighting game characters, maybe doesn't quite stack up to his fighting game MC peers in skill. He has some good feats, like defeating a bunch of trained assassins and dodging a surprise attack from his brother Andy, who could in turn blitz a group of fighters that Geese believed were worthy of employing, so Terry's no newbie, and he created his own personal style as a mix of boxing, karate, kung fu, kickboxing, and street fighting, so he has a strong enough mastery of 5 different fighting styles to the point that he can mix them, create his personal fighting style from them, and then master that style well enough to be considered a top martial artist in a world of some pretty impressive fighters. But it does hurt him that the assassins, though assumedly skilled, are basically featless, and so are Geese's fighters, so it's hard to get an idea feat-wise of where Terry scales to. For that reason, Terry goes into B tier above Liu Kang by virtue of mastering more styles, but below Sam Fisher due to the lack of concrete feats. Now, Master Splinter, let's not play, he obviously goes above Leo, but you might be surprised by how much. First off, Master Splinter is so far above the Ninja Turtles in skill that he was able to beat them 3 times consecutively using different martial arts each time. First Kali, which of course can't be considered here since it's a Filipino stick fighting style. Next Savate and Parkour, French kickboxing and French free running, with it being particularly impressive that he beats all 4 turtles armed with their weapon of mastery at once with a perfectly blended fusion of 2 different martial arts. And then he again beats all 4 armed turtles with Wing Chun, using a combination of precise blocks, countering hand strikes, and nerve strikes. Mastering 4 different styles is impressive, and, for this hand-to-hand tier list, the Savate/Parkour and Wing Chun feats alone would grant B tier. But he also beats 4 armed martial arts masters simultaneously 3 consecutive times. Add to that a mastery of pressure points to the point that he can not only knock a person out, but also disarm them with a pressure point strike as well, and I don't think it's too surprising to put him into A tier. Next is the Red Ranger of the Power Rangers. Well, I think it's safe to say that he's the most skilled Ranger, as when Jason Scott sparred with Zack, a fellow Power Ranger, while both were only at 1/5 of their normal power, Zack couldn't keep up, saying that Jason was a machine. Even more impressively to me was when Rita implied when Tommy ran from a 13-1 fight that Jason could have won in his same position. I think Jason goes into B tier above Terry since, on top of the 13-1 statement, Jason also pretty much trounced a fellow Power Ranger in skill. Shang-Chi, who is easily the most skilled martial artist in Marvel, is probably going to end up in A tier alongside Batman, but let's see. For starters, if anyone is wondering about Iron Fist, Shang-Chi outright says that though they're near equals, Shang-Chi's hand-to-hand skill is superior, and Iron Fist had implied as much as well. First off, he's instantly an A tier via being an expert in all martial arts. I don't know if he's a master of all martial arts, but he's at least an expert and has mastered many different martial arts, as well as is the greatest master of Kung Fu, the oldest codified system of martial arts ever, with the most styles, the most sub-styles, the most techniques, and the longest history of all martial arts in Marvel Comics. He can disarm an opponent of a blade while bare-handed, he can redirect enemy attacks, he can perform a double kick, kicking two separate people with two separate legs at once in a handstand. He disabled the thing's arm with a pressure point even though the thing is made of fucking rocks. He defeated somebody that could no-sell his attacks with a nerve strike to the hand. He threw a man by grabbing his head with his feet. Performed a wrist lock on Spider-Man. He defeated Agent Sin, who was his strongest and fastest opponent yet. And he defeated 7 armed skilled assassins at once. Hell, he even defeated a jaguar once without even hurting it. Shang-Chi goes to the top of A tier, and I definitely considered putting him into S tier, but his not being a master of all martial arts holds him back, and I couldn't find any strong skill feats in terms of prediction, analysis, copying, etc. Conan the Barbarian I'll have to put with Rambo on account of them having similar issues. They're both skilled melee fighters, but neither of them typically use bare hands and typically rely on physical strength when they do. Optimus, I'm not aware of having any hand-to-hand skill feats, so I'm kinda left with a Thor situation. Sorry fam, feels bad. While I don't know if I would consider Shujinko's copy power itself as impressive, as it's kind of a magical power, the fighting skills he absorbed made him quite possibly the most skilled fighter in Mortal Kombat. He was able to copy Bo' Rai Cho's fighting style while sparring him and defeated the master, and by the end of Armageddon has done so with dozens of highly skilled warriors and masters. He's a master of Mantis Kung Fu, Shaolin Kung Fu, Bagua Kung Fu, Chojiao Kung Fu, Silat, and at least 40 more styles of unarmed combat. Maybe not a master of all martial arts styles on Earth, maybe not even an expert, but still the most skilled fighting game character on the list. Wonder Woman is an easy one because there are several instances of her not having her powers or not having her weapons, like when she took down a crowd of a couple dozen armed people without any powers or weapons, or the time where she fought a rage-amped Superman, and though she had powers and used weapons, interspersed weapon attacks with hand-to-hand combat. Taking everything into consideration, I'll put Diana in B tier below James Bond. For Faye, so far as I can tell, and I basically know nothing about him or his verse, he appears to simply have the power of conceive it, believe it, achieve it, and much like Tony Robbins has no martial arts skills to speak of, D tier. So I'm sad that the Disgaea mobile game got shut down since I enjoyed playing it every now and then, but to honor it, Laharl gets B tier under Cap. While he can't copy any technique after looking at it once and isn't a master of all martial arts, he can learn all the fist skills in his game, and with the ones he has, like Blazing Knuckle, which is basically just Shoryuken, Triple Strike, which is an uppercut combo ending with a spike into the ground, Beast King, which is a launching strike into an aerial combo ending with a suplex, and Aura Punch, which is basically a 1-inch punch, he certainly has an aptitude to learning and using multiple different martial arts concepts and skills. Dante gets hurt by the same thing Kratos does, using primarily weapons, which makes sense since they're MCs from similarly styled games, but Dante does have some impressive feats that should apply equally to hand-to-hand combat, like scaling a building, riding a rocket, focusing his senses, scaling a cliff, defeating faster opponents with prediction and feigns, and he has this cool kicking feat that shows kicking skills and precision striking. I think we can do better than C tier, but low B tier's the limit. So this really shouldn't come as a surprise if you've watched this video, but this man tops the list for me. He's a master of all martial arts on Earth, which is an auto A tier. He can copy moves instantly after seeing them once, like Jin Mori or Cap. He does so to a level rivaling or exceeding the original user, even in the case of Shao Li, a move that took a man 50,000 days or over 120 years to master. He knows secret familial martial arts techniques like the Udande that allow him to block any attack from any angle without even putting up a guard or facing the direction of the attack. He can predict entire fights in a glance. He can analyze stylistic weaknesses perfectly and analyze biological weaknesses on a level far exceeding the world's most advanced X-rays. Identified and invented the counters for Muhammad Ali's self-made martial arts style that nobody even noticed existed before, not even his boxing coaches and partners, let alone seen. He also discovered the major weakness of Shaoli almost immediately before even copying it, and also invented a new weakness based on how it worked. And, best of all, Baki tells Doppo and Motobe at the beginning of the series that Yujiro's skills are second to none and constantly growing, which is backed by an earlier statement from Stridum, Yujiro's best friend, who also says that Yujiro is constantly growing in power under the context of Baki being unable to even touch Yujiro even if Yujiro was blinded, so martial power rather than physical power. His feats of skill are incredibly ridiculous and blow a lot of what's on the list out of the water, but take that with a grain of salt since he's the one on the list that I know the best. Others may have similar or better feats and I'm just ignorant of them. Sojiro Mibu seems like a skilled god, but he also seems to be a swordsman. Due to his peerless skill, I'm willing to give him A tier for no openings in his guard, running on water with just skill, basically having Musashi's invisible sword, and stuff like that. And for all the dimensional and conceptual stuff that gets hard to apply, I'll just put him above Goku, I guess. Sailor Moon uses almost exclusively magic and physical power, so around mid-D tier, I think. Madaka's a little inconsistent in skill, like she can defeat 700 million people with a single kick, but she also needs special shoes to walk on water. She's a master judoka, nearly a grandmaster if not so, and is trained in karate, aikido, kenpo, taekwondo, muay thai, and wrestling as well, so averaging the ludicrous 700 million kick feat and the needing floaty shoes for the swimming pool feat, I'll give Madaka a B tier. Garu's another martial arts prodigy in fiction, having techniques like the water stream rock smashing fist that allows the user to attack in a manner similar to a surging tidal wave, as well as repel, negate, and redirect attacks, has the ability to copy and counter techniques, can learn techniques just by reading about them, can predict a fighter's movements through body movements, and can even copy people's movements. He has plenty of feats of repelling attacks with either great precision or to negate or even redirect great strength, and even grows more skilled after each fight. Overall, if all of this doesn't sound familiar, he's basically Yujiro Light. He has all the same skill abilities as Yujiro or people who Yujiro is more skilled than in his verse, just to a lesser degree. For that reason, I'd put Garu into S tier, but the lower end with the possibility that he might pull in a Mai Mask and become the Guardian of S tier and number 1 A tier. John Wick is like James Bond on crack, partly due to the choreography being way better nowadays than it was back in the 60s and 70s where 007 was most prevalent. The man can get out of an armbar, knows multiple different hand-to-hand combat styles, and has beaten just dozens upon dozens of skilled fighters with those skills alone. For that reason, I'll put him directly below Sam Fisher. In the games, Sam Fisher's impressive, but in the books, he's at the peak of realistic skill. Neo's a little harder to gauge because the man basically got console commands on, but based on his martial arts skills that were uploaded into his brain like Jujutsu, Savate, Kenpo, Taekwondo, Drunken Fist, Kung Fu, and more, and his fight with Morpheus, he's definitely impressive, and that's all before becoming the One. After, he can fight dozens of incredibly skilled fighters at once at the same level, so I think with his mastery of dozens of styles and ability to fight dozens of skilled people at once, he fits nicely into B tier above Laharl. Gon is nearly featless for martial skill, usually using Nen, strength, and his fishing rod earlier, but he can typically match somewhat evenly with the extremely gifted Killua, and with Killua, defeated Binold after days of fighting, so I'll give that B tier. Yusuke's able to pull off some pretty good feats, like fighting Sensui's rock barrage barehanded while hopping from rock to rock. He dodged attacks from Chu, whose after-image movement technique was so fast and fluid, Yusuke couldn't even land a strike on him. Yusuke can KO enemies while asleep, and Yusuke defeated Kazemaru by leading his own homing shurikens back at him, a la Goku and Frieza, so I'll put him in B tier below Cap. Vivek's a skilled weapon fighter, like having learned from the sword singers that were skilled enough to sing a continent with their swords, but he did defeat somebody who can decide the outcome of a battle by singing with his milk finger, whatever the fuck that means, so I'll give Vivek A tier above Sun Wukong via probably being incredibly skilled beyond belief, but having feats that are way too vague and confusing. Akuma goes above Jin via scaling up from Ryu exorbitantly. Iron Fist goes directly below Shang-Chi due to priorly discussed stuff for Shang-Chi and having grappling skills, which I didn't know he had. And Cassandra Cain goes into S tier as one of the most skilled martial artists in all of comics, even above Batman and Lady Deathstrike, with her body reading and copying abilities, her pressure points, and her scaling. Yor Forager goes into B tier since she's an assassin, with most of her CQC feats being armed, and her only major unarmed feat was defeating a wild boar barehanded as a child, and a couple of pressure point feats and knowing a shoulder lock. Leon Kennedy goes into B tier due to this being his only remarkable hand-to-hand skill feat. Iza Yoi goes into C tier due to mainly relying on strength, speed, and his anti-gift in combat. And Mario goes into C tier too due to mainly relying on power-ups and abilities. Rise of Humanity's Zhong Yu rockets straight into S tier via his unconscious visualization giving him instinctive reaction, the shockwaves of his strikes allowing him to attack organs directly, not counting his ki that can do the same thing, his ability to copy entire fighting styles after seeing them once, and his ability to predict potentially hundreds of millions of skills ahead at once. As of right now, his predictive abilities are the best on the list bar none, but several people on this list can even negate people's ability to predict their attacks, and his other feats are pretty much just high A tier. Ra's al Ghul should go somewhere below Batman due to his being comparable to him, but never better. So let's say below Shang-Chi and Iron Fist, but above Jin Mori in A tier, and Blade gets bumped into C tier since he mainly fights while armed, but has some impressive feats like avoiding a surprise attack from a demon, and having some armed feats with a smidge of crossover into unarmed territory. Daredevil is another particularly skilled martial artist, being that he fights almost 100% reliant on his hand-to-hand skill, and is, of course, blind, yet still able to fight superpowered individuals with his bare hands and can KO and even kill people with pressure point attacks, so he gets B tier below Leo, and Naruto Uzumaki gets B tier below Wildcat due to his being a talented taijutsu fighter, but having no particularly impressive skill feats in that regard and typically relying on his jutsus, specifically Talk no Jutsu, to win the day. Punisher is a learned martial artist of many styles and techniques that has analytical abilities and can dodge even the likes of Spider-Man just by the sound of him swinging, so below Daredevil since of the 11 fights with Matt, Frank's only won 4, Shredder narratively scales down from Splinter, Mim from wielding a red sword goes into C tier due to his main use of a sword, though his Dominion of War might give him some unarmed knowledge or ability, and he did defeat Satan in one-on-one combat using tactics from Musashi's Book of Five Rings, though I'm unfamiliar with the series so grain of salt. Sid Kagano from Eminence in the Shadow goes under Medaka in B tier by basically being Rimuru, but with sword skills and, more importantly, good feats of prediction and analysis. KOF main protagonist Kyo Kusanagi goes into B tier above Wildcat due to being a skilled practitioner of his family's traditional martial art, and being able to clash with other skilled master fighters, but relying too much on the fire abilities of the style as opposed to the actual hand-to-hand elements. And Virtua Fighter MC and Baji Quan master Akira Yuki goes into A tier above Ryu via being a Ryu-level master of martial arts with the ability to hone and sharpen his Baji skill to a razor edge, and having a plethora of moves and skills vastly more reliant on actual martial arts as opposed to chi energy. Art of Fighting's Ryo Sakazaki is a master of Kokugen Ryu Karate, has a ton of great martial arts techniques, but relies on chi projection as much as Ryu's Ansatsuken does, with Ryo being less experienced and with less history, so Ryo goes B tier below Liu Kang largely due to the lack of concrete skill feats, but still high due to his karate mastery and martial arts moves. Aang is pretty devoid of any martial arts skills, really only having any at all due to the forms of bending being those of martial arts, so C tier. Satoru Gojo is a fairly nimble fighter, but he's really only half the martial artist the others on the list are, C tier. And Deku from My Hero Academia is a pretty analytical kid and can put his analysis into action, but he doesn't seem to have any martial arts training that I know of, with his Fajin power not even being martial arts, rather just another power, so C tier as well. Dinah Lance is an absolute baddie. She can cut off blood flow at vital points with a touch and trains with Wildcat, with people like Oracle even thinking it's possible for her to trade with Batman, though that's with her powers. So Black Canary gets B tier above Black Panther, and my main man Moon Knight, who's versatile in all martial arts, can neg-diff the likes of Midnight, and can even beat a group of armed men that got the drop on him, goes into A tier below Shujinko. Zuko goes under Aang for the same reason Aang got his placement, except he only knows one style. Daniel Park from Lookism gets A tier for instinctive reaction and being able to copy over 15 different martial arts styles and incorporate them and mix them into his fighting style seamlessly, and being one of the most skilled fighters in Lookism. Abaddon the Despoiler goes below Karn, as I was unable to find any unarmed skill feats for him, but he should somewhat scale. Who I believe to be King from Tekken goes below Ryu but above Vivek, via scaling down from Jin but having more concrete feats than Vivek. Beerus goes behind the Red Ranger in B tier, as he has a couple of pressure point feats but generally relies on his overwhelming power and ki and lacks skill feats. Kenichi is basically Daniel but better in every way, being able to break out of high level locks, use Sakyukin with one arm, so completely defend and counter any attack that enters his range with a single hand, has an unpredictable attack called the Mumiyoshi that combines the principles of 4 different martial arts, karate, jujutsu, Chinese Kempo, and Muay Thai, into one move, can nullify the attacks and submit attackers even while sitting, can move to a different location while simultaneously engaged in a martial arts fight, and quite possibly defeated Hayato at the end of the series, which would put him at the top of the list. But since we don't even know if he actually did, let alone how, he goes to the top of A. Ranma goes into B tier via his mastery of Vale Tudo and abilities to copy and master techniques after seeing them once, as well as the other martial arts styles he knows that are either less combat practical or use weapons. Spike goes into B tier via being able to defeat stronger and faster opponents and having a style that uses the opponent's excessive force to control the flow of the fight, and Odin just goes above Thor. Oliver goes right below Black Canary, as they've always been shown to be near equals, with her slightly above. Mantis can beat a group of people and her old master, and can even put herself in a hand-to-hand combat trance to fight while unconscious, but only B tier above Bond since the unconscious fighting itself is a result of her powers. Shev Shelios goes above Dante but below Diana, and Axel Stone goes above Ryo and B via being a very talented martial artist that's beaten massive groups of enemies and has fought skilled fighters, even incredibly skilled ones such as his rival Shiva, as well as martial arts robots, and being a master of Kung Fu with a bit of karate, boxing, and kickboxing that allows him to use several dozen hand-to-hand martial arts techniques. Highlander goes into C tier since I don't believe he has many if any hand-to-hand skill feats. Max Guevara gets B tier via being given extensive martial arts training, but my being unable to find any feats. Shigo goes B tier via scaling to Kim, who we'll talk more about later, and having some feats of taking out multiple goons at once and more physically powerful fighters. Steven Universe goes C tier since he's good enough at combat to contribute to the crystal gems, but isn't particularly skilled and often uses his shield. Poison goes below Finn, as I don't know what Poison's style is, and Poison lacks too many concrete feats. Guy goes below Ryu via scaling down in martial arts while focusing on multiple opponent fighting and splintering off into stealth. Eva Ushiromiya goes into B tier beneath Sid via knowing but not specifically mastering Tai Chi, possibly other Chinese Kenpo, Karate, Taekwondo, Capoeira, and another style that I don't know. And rival school's Batsuichi Manji is a practitioner of ninjutsu with a firm foundation of powerful martial arts skills, so B tier beneath Ryo Sakazaki. Edward Falcon doesn't seem to have any notable hand-to-hand skill feats, so he's dropped right under Optimus. Philia typically uses Samson for combat, though fights a bit, so C tier. Yugo Ogami spends half his time fighting as a werewolf with claws, so including that is a bit murky, but he's a powerful professional boxer, so I'll put him above Finn. Captain Falcon's best skill feat is taking down 2 armed men, so below Wonder Woman. Chun-Li scales directly to Ryu, and Lon Di is no chump, beating a master of Hazuki style easily, so I'll put him in B tier above Ryo. A prodigy of Mugen Tenshin style ninjutsu, specifically the Tenjinmon style that focuses on evasion and agility, Kasumi is a gifted kunoichi and, in turn, a talented martial artist capable of defeating other experienced and gifted martial artists. so I'll put her above Medaka via her experience in martial arts, specifically beating nearly as skilled opponents. Deathstroke has briefly matched the Bronze Tiger and has even beaten Batman in a fight before, though weapons were involved and ultimately Slade and Bruce are near equals, if not with Bruce being better. Snake Eyes is another skilled ninjutsu master who has mastered pressure point strikes and even single-handedly defeated a group of armed enemies with his hands bound, so basically Sam Fisher plus. Catman is like Batman Light or Wildcat on crack since he's KO'd 2 ninjas with a single move and even fought evenly with Batman, so while Slade is probably more skilled overall, Catman goes one above him in hand-to-hand combat, and Akira Kongo goes into C tier since he does hand-to-hand fighting, and he's an ace fighter that knows basics like counters and suplexes, but typically relies on his racial powers and strength. All Might, as far as I know, relies entirely on One For All, so C tier since in doing so, he probably at least has a basic grasp of hand-to-hand combat. Might Guy makes it fairly high into B tier via being able to fight a skilled fighter with magic powers just by looking at the movements of their feet, since he can't look at their eyes without falling under their genjutsu hypnosis, and can increase his strength and speed with acupuncture through the 8 gates. Morrigan ends up lower in B tier via consistently being able to fight multiple opponents at once and being a generally dexterous fighter, but relying heavily on her magic. Gang Ryong has dozens of powerful techniques, with about half of them actually being hand-to-hand techniques and not ki techniques, and has several feats of great agility in both movement and dodging, so he gets above Snake Eyes. Baki gets top of A with Kenichi via having gained instinctive reaction by age 13, having insane predictive and analytical skills, being able to copy near uncopyable techniques after seeing them once, basically being in the top 1% of martial artists in the world at age 13, and working his way up to being the second most skilled martial artist in the world, behind one of the 3 top martial artists on this list. Takeshi, like his brother, is only a brawler and has limited high-level hand-to-hand combat skills. Lindong gets C tier via just being a martial arts flavored wizard as far as I can tell, and Ryo Narushima, as fucked up as he is definitely high-end B tier material, being able to copy and perfectly integrate skills seen once, analyze and predict with the best of them, and master a style of karate that's the equivalent of a hunter attempting to ambush his prey, as well as a kung fu style and MMA. Almost nearly top of A, mastering the insanely diverse Nico style and having dozens of different techniques, and having a mastery of counter-striking, redirection and submission, evasion and positioning, using all kata of the Nico style, so footwork, grappling, redirection, and striking in essence, in a perfect harmony for the ultimate formless counter, and can even redirect the attacks of multiple opponents with a single move, but his analytical skills are somewhat lacking, and his existing feats are good, but not quite above the likes of Masters of All Martial Arts or A-toppers like Kenichi and Baki. Karim Yoon is hard to find info on and someone I'm unfamiliar with, but due to the sheer fact that he can compete in MMA competitions with Taekwondo, must mean he's quite a beast in terms of skill, so I'll give him B tier below Sid. Cast goes above Edward Falcon via basically being a similar idea, except she's more involved in the actual hand-to-hand aspect. 25th Bam is a good example of a character that's basically a wizard, but in preparation for losing his Shinsu, or to use in conjunction with his Shinsu, he spent a long time training in martial arts and is one of the most skilled fighters in his series, though he lacks definitive feats other than mastering different dojos and gyms and scaling to other skilled yet largely featless fighters, so below Guy and above Red Ranger. I'm not aware of Gangwon Ho having any notable hand-to-hand skill feats, being a swordsman, so C tier. Rai relies more on his special powers and strength than hand-to-hand skill, so C tier. And Sung Jin Woo had some good pattern studying feats before he gained his powers, but like Deku, they don't really show up after the first quarter of the series, so below Deku. Yu is an exceptional boxer that took multiple weight class division belts, got the championship belt soon after his debut and never lost a match, can copy moves that took fellow champions years to master, becomes more skilled in response to a more powerful foe, might be able to predict an opponent's movements if Jean-Pierre can do it too, has full control of his whole body, can deflect attacks with his strikes, might be able to replicate Jean's reducing damage by rolling with the attack, and can even attack internal organs directly, so easily the most skilled boxer on the list, and in B tier. Carmen Sandiego is a decent martial artist for sure, defeating 2 armed opponents, but is more of a thief and thusly only bottom of B tier. Sam is the most analytical of their spy trio and has access to the black belt to increase her hand-to-hand skill, so probably not above James Bond, but right up there. Kim Possible knows 16 styles of Kung Fu, helped Shigo take down 2 much bigger and stronger pro wrestlers, used a dabbled-in Mantis style to counter the Crane style of Hirotaka, defeated 3 armed ninjas while unarmed, and could even defeat a giant octopus from inside its tank, so she certainly deserves right above the slightly more realistic Sam. And Alice goes above Garu as, while she has god-tier feats like being able to predict the movements of people years in advance, instantly creating counters to a fighting style like others in A tier and S tier, and is said to master everything in existence, which would include all martial arts, she seems to largely be a spell sword, rarely if ever using hand-to-hand. Reed has analytical prediction, can redirect blunt attacks out of his body using martial arts, has high-level analysis abilities of an opponent, and goes into A tier below Daniel. Maki is an impressive street fighter that can do a spinning handstand tornado kick and can perform many different locks and holds, so I'll put her into B tier as a skilled acrobatics-based street fighter. Remo, being a master of the origin of all martial arts in his verse, Sinanju, goes into B tier. Geese is a top-level Aki Jujitsuka, but relies a little too much on his chi powers to rank too high. Heihachi's skill exceeds Jin's and rivals Akuma's. And Death's Hand is a master of the Fallen Blades attack form, which doesn't apply here, but likely has some understanding of the way of the open palm and the way of the closed fist, as he's neutral between those 2 factions, so I guess low B tier works. Kiryu-chan is skilled enough to neg-diff a normal person, and dexterous enough to disarm a man and catch his airborne knife without even looking, but also can copy fighting styles after seeing them once, and is a master of styles including, but not limited to, boxing, kickboxing, karate, judo, wrestling, pro wrestling, capoeira, taekwondo, muay thai, aikido, BJJ, silat, and jeet kune do in the form of his dragon style, so B tier above you. M. Bison scales way down from Ryu, so I'll put him above Ranma. Shao Kahn mainly relies on his overwhelming power and energy projections, so scaling him down from Liu Kang, I'll possibly, against my better judgment, put him above Spike Spiegel. Aquaman basically has no hand-to-hand skill feats that I know of, so D tier above Steven, since his fundamentals are probably better via combat experience. Dredd has good feats of precision striking and can take down enemies without even using his hands, so around that Sam Fisher Snake Eyes level. I'll put him beneath Sam. Typhus is gross, so below Abaddon. Nanami goes into S tier since she can copy techniques and even statistics, predict any move an opponent will make at a glance, has instinctive reactions so perfect and fluid that there are no wasted movements, and even when fighting enemies of equal speed to her dodging looks like their attacks are phasing through her like Baki's after images, avoiding each attack by a margin that is microscopic and invisible. She can completely analyze and counter sword styles after witnessing a single attack, determining the opponent's exact weakness in the process. She can attack organs directly, and is a peerless master of Koturyu, an unarmed style of swordsmanship where the user uses their body as the sword. And Luther Strode goes beneath Kasumi due to his experience fighting against fighters with hundreds of years of experience, from different backgrounds, time periods, and different fighting styles in martial arts, yet being self-taught and having feats like being able to kill a person with 2 fingers, paralyzing people with nerve strikes, and fighting 2 armed fighters at once. Saiga defeated 6 men, 1 being armed, and is familiar with martial arts vital anatomy, defeating a larger opponent by rupturing his eardrums, back-kicking his groin, and finishing him with an Ippon Ken to the Jinshu point, so he gets high B tier. Sonic gets B tier via beating Emerald in 30 seconds, despite Emerald having a better version of Sonic's powers. And Hinezumi gets B tier via there just being generic martial artists, but they do exist to fight. Yuri Hyuga is a trained martial artist that seems to be a kickboxer with a southern-style kung fu influence, so I'll give him B tier above Gon. Pyromaniac Zhao goes below Zuko via basically being him, but with nothing visual to compare. And Adam goes into C tier as he basically relies entirely on his Eyes of the Lord and his durability and power of will. Finally, Kirby at the near bottom of D tier since his most impressive skill feat is maintaining his balance. Alright, finally done! After 5 days of research and scripting, I've ranked all 150 plus characters even though I had no idea of who half of them even were. That was kind of a blast. I love skill discussions and kind of had an idea from the ones that I knew who would be in S tier. And I'll even outright say that the top 4 are pretty much all first place. They're all nearly equal and definitely comparable in most regards. Alright, thank you all so much for watching, and thanks to Parsons for the idea and the list, and thanks to Lined Office for the major help. Remember, if you want more tier lists, 70 likes. Don't know what I'd do next, but it'll probably be a style or technique ranking, maybe a smaller project than this. By the way, I'm getting my wisdom teeth out next month and won't be able to record for a while, so I'll be releasing all of my pre-recorded videos until I'm better, and keep track of what like goals we hit so that I can do those come January. Alright, do all that great YouTube stuff, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.